Hello and welcome to Fresh Perspectives. My name is Gail, and today, before I introduce my guest of the day, I want to say hello to a very special 92-year-old friend of mine whose name is Jean Anderson. Hi, Jean. Just wanted to greet you on my TV show. Okay, now I will introduce my guest of the day, and his name is Dr. Earl Freling. He's a chiropractor. You've been doing this a lot of years, haven't
Yes, I have.
you?
34 years.
34
And
years.
still going. I don't feel that old, but
But your hair has turned gray.
oh, don't tell anybody.
Okay, now how did you happen to become interested in becoming a chiropractor?
Well, it was literally by accident. I was in a very bad car accident back in 1981, and I started seeing a chiropractor at that time, and I was just finishing up my curriculum at Fredonia State University in the medical technology field. And the more I found out about the field, especially with recombinant DNA technology coming in, I was sort of losing interest in it. And one day, just out of the blue, my doctor of chiropractic asked me what I planned on doing after college. And I said, well, I'm really not sure. I am scheduled to do an internship in medical technology with the emphasis on recombinant DNA technology, but I don't like where it's going. I don't like what it's being used for.
Right.
And I'm open for suggestions. And he said, well, have you ever considered chiropractic? And I said, well, actually I have. And I like what you do and the results I've received, and I am interested. So he said, well, tell you what, he said, you fill out an application to a school, and I'll write you a letter of recommendation. And he referred me to the National College of Chiropractic outside Chicago, which was the foremost chiropractic college of chiropractic in the entire nation at the time, actually the world.
Wow.
So I applied, I was accepted, and I went. And I didn't particularly care for living in Chicago for 4 years, but it was certainly nice to come back to Western New York.
So you had to go to college all over again after having already been through college and almost ready to go to work.
It was a long time.
Yeah.
Long road.
I imagine it was. Well, tell our viewing audience, what was your education like? What all did you have to study and everything?
I started out as an engineering major. I actually attended Georgia Institute of Technology School of Aerospace Engineering for a while. And I didn't care for Atlanta either. I'm not a big town person, or a big city. So I transferred back to Fredonia State, which is where I started, and I continued with engineering for 2 more years. And I decided that wasn't for me, and I changed to medical technology with the recombinant DNA technology as a backup. And in undergraduate, you're taking anywhere between 16 and 18 credit hours per semester. But when I went to chiropractic school, it was a different story.
Oh, yeah.
We were taking between 27 and 36 hours a week. We went to class from 7:30 in the morning until 5:30 at night, and all you did was eat, sleep, and go to class and study when you can. It was very, very intense curriculum.
Well, I think that you and I have had conversations about this before, and it seems to me it's more to it than just learning how to adjust the bones and things.
Yes, we have a very strong background in clinical science, physiology, anatomy, nutrition, even pharmacology. We are required to take many of the same courses that medical doctors do so that we understand medications and their use or misuse in a lot of cases. And so we basically learn the same many of the same things that medical doctors do, and sometimes more in certain areas, especially in the anatomy, physiology, and nutrition departments.
Yes, because medical doctors don't have to study nutrition.
No, not as a general rule. But we've come a long ways in our profession as far as that goes, and gained a lot of acceptance throughout the population and medical community.
Yeah, nowadays you can people can use their insurance towards
Yes,
chiropractic.
in many cases, particularly Medicare, workers' compensation, no-fault insurances. I don't participate with a whole lot of HMOs or PPOs, just mostly because of the red tape. I try to keep things simple and with as least amount of paperwork as possible, which we have 5 times as much paperwork now as we ever have, even with computers.
Oh yeah. I do know. I've in the last few years had people that are massage therapists tell me that massage is still not covered by insurance.
Quite often, but if they are referred by a medical doctor or a chiropractor, usually with a case such as workers' compensation or no fault, which follow the same guidelines in New York State, they will cover massage therapy if they're willing to do the paperwork. It's quite involved.
I see.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Now, I want to get down to some experiences that I've had with you over the years.
I know this one.
And there just happens to be somebody in the studio at the moment watching us. And it was because of him that we met you the first time.
That's right.
I had been seeing advertisements that there was a new young chiropractor in the Mayville area. This was probably in the 1980s.
It was 1987.
Was that when it was?
Yes, it was.
And one morning, it was when my son was a teenager and on summer vacation. And we were expecting, I had a lot to do that day actually. We were expecting visitors in the evening hours, and I had a lot of preparations to do. So I was having a busy day anyway, and when my son approached me to say he'd been yawning, and his jawbone came loose.
Dislocated on both sides.
Yeah. So.
And you're still laughing.
So, anyways, I think that you might want to tell us what you had to do.
Yeah, that was a very interesting case. I had to. I didn't have any rubber gloves, so I had to wear some finger cots so I could get inside his mouth. And we had him.
When I called you to say what I wanted you to do, I mean, I had never met you before or anything, and I remember I called up and I said, and you go, "You want me to what?" I mean, he couldn't close his mouth and he couldn't swallow.
No,
you know.
and
So while you were waiting for us, you went to uptown to the drugstore
yes,
and
I
got
got some
something.
finger cots because they didn't have the gloves, and he was in a lot of pain. The muscles, mastication, the masseters were in spasm, and he was hurting very badly. And I recall I had to have him lie down on the table on his back, and I got on both sides of his mouth with my thumbs inside his mouth on his lower teeth, and I had to push one side in, and I'd go to push the other side in, and the other side would pop back out. And I went back and forth a few times, and finally I practically had to stand on him to get both sides go in at the same time, and I could feel the clunk when both sides reduced.
Right.
And it was instantaneous relief. And I told him afterwards to keep his mouth shut.
Don't yawn so
Yes.
wide. Yeah, you know, It was a very strange experience. I know that we sort of laugh about it, and it was so many years ago. But anyways, it was just a very interesting situation. So anyway, that was how we met you.
Yes.
And then one time I sprained one of my ankles. Oh no, that's not what I wanted to say next. The thing that I wanted to say next was you gave my son some tips, on things he could do to prevent chiropractic problems.
Correct.
And one of the things that you told him was not to have your wallet in your back pocket while you're sitting down. Would you explain
Correct.
to the viewing audience
Well,
why that would be?
It's very important. In fact, we have a layman's term for that. We call it pocketbook sciatica.
Pocketbook sciatica.
Yes, and I see a lot of this nowadays, especially with people having more plastic cards in their wallets.
yeah. All of the stores have a store card that you have to use.
Correct.
If
Bonus points
if
or
you want to
whatever.
get the discounts,
That's right. And as a result of that, wallets have become very thick. That's one of the first things I notice when people come in and I have them remove everything from their pockets. I look at the size of their wallet, and I can usually tell that that's part of the problem. And what happens is that your spine compensates to the tilt that the wallet adds underneath that particular side wherever you wear the wallet. So in that sense, you're inducing what they call a basic pelvic distortion pattern or dysfunctional sacroiliac, which can result in a lot of problems, not just low back pain, but also sciatic neuritis. So that's one of the issues, is to tell people that when they're in the car especially, or riding somewhere, is to take that wallet out and set it on the side. Don't sit on that wallet for long
only
periods
when
of
you're
time.
standing and walking.
Certainly.
Well, anyway, there's probably other reasons you shouldn't carry it in your back pocket anyway, like pickpockets and
Well,
things
maybe not so much around here, but maybe in the city. But I've noticed a lot of truck drivers, people who drive for a living, will wear a wallet that has a chain on it. I call it a chain drive wallet. And that way they don't leave it behind. It's attached to their belt, and you can put it in their pocket when they're walking. But when they sit in the truck or
they can
anywhere,
take it out
set
without
on the side.
losing
Correct.
it. Yeah, that's a good idea. Everybody should probably do that, because you hear about people paying for something at a store or restaurant or whatever, and then they walk away without their wallet.
Oh, it happens all the time. And for the same reason, we see that with purses. I quite often will pick up someone's purse when they come in, and just to see how much that weighs. And it's amazing how,
oh gosh,
I mean, they have everything, including the kitchen sink, in there. And
wow.
I've seen purses that probably weigh 20, 30 pounds. And that's a lot of weight to be carrying on your shoulder. That can create problems in itself.
I worked at years ago, I worked at a couple of different group homes, and there was this one female person who was one of the people that I took care of, and I remember she had several sets of makeup, and she carried them all in her purse, and she probably didn't even need to apply the stuff during the day. You put it on in the morning, and that should be it. But she had all kinds of stuff in that purse. And then when she'd go for a walk down the street or something, she'd always hold it way up here like this. But then she was always complaining about shoulder pain,
Well, that's interesting.
And it seems to me that she was taken to the doctor for the shoulder pain and everything. And so I finally noticed that she was carrying her purse right up there, and it was quite heavy, and I'm thinking, well, that's got to be the reason her shoulder hurts. If
Certainly.
she maybe would, let her just hold it in her hand and let her arm, dangle down and not carry more things that she needed to take with
Right,
her.
especially when she's
She
walking for
probably
exercise.
wouldn't have shoulder pain. It probably would even go away.
It
you
just
know?
might.
So I know what you mean. Sometimes people do things that are causing problems for themselves and they don't even realize they're doing it.
Certainly.
Now, okay, now we'll get back to when I sprained my ankle. And I remember it was about 3 weeks afterwards, and it wasn't really feeling any better yet. And I thought to myself, decided I'd go and have you have a look at it and see if you could do something about it, because it still hurt as much as it did in the beginning. And I remember you did something where you did something to my foot. You actually made an adjustment
Correct.
to my foot.
Yes.
And then a few years later, I remember somebody happening to mention, just somebody I was visiting with happened to mention, well, I went to Dr. Freling because I had a sprained ankle and it wasn't getting better. And she goes, and I went to him and he made an adjustment on my foot and now I'm all better. She goes, it's all better now. And so what happens when somebody sprains an ankle and it doesn't seem to be
Healing.
getting better? They're still having the pain.
That's it.
What is the chiropractic problem that's
Well,
wrong?
to begin with, the foot has 26 bones, and one of the joints near the ankle is what's called the talonavicular joint, which is the joint beyond or distal to the actual ankle mortise joint. And what I see quite often with an eversion type of sprain where people roll an ankle is that when they pull or sprain the ligaments that hold the fibula to the talus bone, that talonavicular joint will subluxate or kind of go out of place. It's not a full dislocation.
But it's a partial dislocation.
Yes, it's a partial dislocation. And that ligament, usually the anterior middle talofibular ligament, will not heal until that talonavicular joint is back in place. So I have techniques that I use to reduce that subluxation. And quite often it's a rather audible pop that when I adjust that ankle, you can feel that move and pop back into place. And usually within a few days, the ankle is completely better. But basically with that type of subluxation, you're throwing off the biomechanics of the foot completely. And it's never going to heal, pun intended.
Okay, so that's why you hear people who've sprained an ankle go on and on and on for months and they're still complaining about the pain.
And quite often, unfortunately, I see a lot of these people ending up going for orthopedic consultations and having surgery on something that could have been corrected very easily with a simple adjustment.
Okay, that sounds like a really good piece of advice. I hope that somebody who's having the problem is hearing this.
You just might.
And then there was another time I had a kind of an interesting injury, apparently. I remember I was feeling kind of tight and sore in the neck and shoulder areas, but where it hurt the worst, I remember, was in my left wrist and part of my left hand. And in fact, it was in such, I was having so much pain in that wrist and hand, it was about all I could do to drive to your office. So you were doing the adjustments on me and so forth, and then I noticed you doing something with my arm, with my left arm. It was the left arm, and you were doing something different that you'd never done on me before. And I'm going, what are you doing? And you go, your shoulder joint is partially dislocated.
Yes.
And it was incredible because as soon as you popped it back to where it was supposed to be, the pain in my wrist and hand started to subside. It
Correct.
started to feel better right away.
Yes.
It's amazing that something going on here could cause all that pain in the wrist and hand.
Yes. The nerves that supply the hand all emerge from the neck, and there are about 8 different places between the cervical spine and the fingers where those nerves can become pinched. And quite often I'll see people fall on an outstretched arm, or even being in a car accident where they're suddenly jutted forward and twisted because of a restraining harness, or an airbag goes off. They receive what's called a partial dislocation, where the shoulder joint, which is basically a ball and socket type of joint, will momentarily subluxate or dislocate, pop out of the joint, and go back in, but quite often not all the way.
Oh,
And the ligaments that hold that joint together, which are called the capsular ligaments, become stretched. So you have a situation where the ligaments are under tension, the muscles around there go into spasm, which can create inflammation, which subsequently puts pressure on the nerves, which supply the hand. There are several different causes. One of the more common ones occurs between the collarbone and the first rib. And that's all tied together with the shoulder. So usually if I reduce that injury after chiropractic adjustment and normalize the biomechanics of that area, it reduces the pressure on those nerves that go down the arm. And I have actually seen cases years ago when I was coaching wrestling. There was an athlete, one young teenage wrestler who came in who had been in a chicken wing or bar arm type of situation, partially dislocated his shoulder, and his hand was actually turning blue.
Ooh.
Because along with the brachial plexus, which is the bundle of nerves that emerges from the neck, you also have an artery and a vein. So if it's bad enough, you can put enough pressure on that artery to impede the blood flow to the hand.
Oh my gosh.
And in that case, I reduced his shoulder and almost immediately restored the circulation to his hand.
That must have been a really scary situation
It's
for
interesting.
him, you know.
Yeah.
Am I going to lose my hand,
Yeah,
you know?
you never know.
So, yeah. So anyways, I remember you told me that I had some trigger points in the front of that shoulder right after you adjusted it, and you told me to apply pressure to there every day for a while.
Yes.
You want to talk about the trigger points?
Well,
a
trigger
little bit?
points basically are areas in the muscle tissue where there's been a long-standing spasm. And from that spasm, you produce a lot of lactic acid from the breakdown products of muscle tissue metabolism. At the same time, with inflammation, the area becomes congested. So you're not getting fresh blood in, you're not getting the old blood out. So these products, these byproducts, which are acidic in nature, start to accumulate within the muscle tissue. As a result of that, your body recognizes that as a site of inflammation and sends in healing fibrocytic scar-forming cells that will actually wall this area of damage off. These areas can also become calcified. So you have this area of scar tissue with lactic acid and sometimes calcium deposits built up within them. And the best way to get them out of there is to manually manipulate and break them up, which improves the circulation, flushes the old blood and lactic acid out, and brings in fresh oxygenated blood to promote healing of that area, complete healing. Otherwise, you always have a weak spot in that muscle which is prone to chronic re-aggravation or exacerbation. That's basically what's going on with the trigger point. And quite often you have to address the trigger points
in order for the
to get
adjustments to
get
do
complete
what they
healing. I like to incorporate a lot of trigger point therapy.
Yeah,
into
there
my
are some people who are just trigger point therapists.
Yes, myotherapist or trigger point therapist. I like to do both. I think I like to adjust every aspect of the human frame.
Oh yeah, make sure it all gets taken care of. So the body part can definitely heal.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Now, over the years, you've invited us to a couple of events in your life
Okay.
that were kind of fun.
Yeah.
And I remember one of them was a picnic out at your home in the country.
Yes.
in Ripley. You had a big picnic. The one thing I remember most about that event was spending a lot of time going up and down a steep hill.
Yes.
Down to the gorge.
Down the gorge, yes.
I know every time we saw you heading down that way with a group of people to show them around, my husband always wanted to go, so we were, it seems like we were going up and down every time you did. And I remember you making a comment at one point when you're going back up the hill, you're going, my legs are probably going to be sore tomorrow. And I remember Carl saying, yeah, maybe you'll have to go to a chiropractor for a joke, you know.
I probably did. Too.
Yeah, and it was a really hot day too. I
Yes, it
remember it
was.
was a really hot, muggy day, and a lot of people came.
Yeah, we had over 100 people there that
There
day.
was over 100 people
Yeah,
came to your
yeah,
party. So
Yeah, the part I remember the most was I had a pile of logs out front, and I was talking to Carl, and I was actually standing on one of the logs, and at that point I was as tall as he was.
yeah, because he's 6'8". So yeah, you know, it's like we can't go anywhere. You know, people notice how tall he is, and people almost always ask him how tall he is, you know.
That has to get old.
It does. You know, how many times can you listen to somebody ask your husband how tall he is, you know, or they're making comments about, I hope you played professional basketball or something like
yes.
that, you know, yeah.
Yeah, that has
So-
to get old.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. You know, it's like, oh. So anyways, the other event was your 40th birthday party.
Oh yes, that was a couple years ago.
Yeah. Now, I remember Carl had to work that night, so he couldn't go, but I came and my son came with me. And I remember everything was black. The napkins, the plates,
the
you
bu-
know,
the
everything,
the
everything
balloons.
was, everything was black. I
Yes.
remember, like,
I was dressed in black.
like everybody, like it was like having a 40th birthday meant something bad or something like that. I remember that. And I remember specifically that you didn't want personal gifts for yourself at your birthday party. You wanted people, in lieu of birthday gifts, for you to make donations
To the Humane
to
Society.
the Humane
and
Society.
the dog shelters. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah, people brought dog food.
Right,
and
right.
made donations. It was wonderful.
We discovered that the dog that we had at the time was apparently allergic to this particular food, but did not learn this until after he'd already bought a 50-pound bag of the same dog food. So Carl said that Henry and I should take that 50-pound bag of dog food and have that be our
As a donation.
birthday gift donation
Certainly.
for you. So, but because it was a big, heavy bag of dog food, and Henry drove a pickup truck at the time, he backed the pickup truck up to the door of the building that we had, the party was in. Was that
It's
in
the American Legion.
Was that the Legion?
It was the Legion right here in Mayville.
Yeah, so anyway, to unload the bag of dog food without killing ourselves or anything, throwing anything out of place, you know.
Oh, God forbid.
So then he went and parked the truck after we got it in, and then we went and sat at the table with some other people, husband and wife, and the wife just happened to have been a teacher of Henry's when he was like in second grade or something
Okay.
like that, and she couldn't, she was a patient of yours too, and for some reason, when she saw us doing that, she got it in her head that Henry must work for the SPCA. And we're sitting there, we had the hardest time getting it through her head that he did not work there, you know, that we were
Interesting.
just backing up there to drop the food off, you know. And she just wasn't getting it through her head somehow, you know. But so we had a good laugh over it anyway,
No doubt.
you know. But it's not that he wouldn't have liked to work there,
Certainly.
maybe, but who wouldn't like to work and take care of animals? But
Bring them all home.
right, right. That would be tempting, wouldn't it? If
Yes,
you
it
worked
would.
in an animal shelter,
Yes,
you
that would
keep
be-
meeting ones that you liked
Yes,
a lot.
that'd be tough.
Oh yeah. Now there was music and dancing too.
Yes.
There was somebody there that her and her husband were playing records or something, and
Yes.
everybody was dancing.
Yep.
And then there was a couple of people that came in from a dance studio
Correct. It was,
that taught us a certain
different steps.
routine,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
know,
That was,
we had to
That
do.
was Laura Samina from Guys and Dolls Dance Studio in Jamestown.
So that was kind of interesting that we
Yeah,
did
we
that.
had a DJ, Sandy and Richard Newell.
Right.
And yeah, it was a good time. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So, well, anyway, this past summer, at the very beginning of the summer, I had to come over to Ripley and for a few adjustments.
Yes.
I was having a bit of a problem there. And I couldn't help but notice that, well, the first time I noticed it was I had parked out on the front side of the building, and I thought, you know, there was a little street there on the corner of the building that you're in, and I thought I was going to be able to drive around a block. You know, I wasn't familiar
Oh, no.
with the side streets, so I turned down there, and then I realized I see this dead end
Dead
sign.
end
So I
road.
know, wait a
Yep.
minute, this is not a block I can drive
Yes.
around. But so I turned around behind the building, and there's a really nice car sitting there, a Jaguar.
Yes.
I'm going, I wonder if that's Earl Freeling's car, you know.
That's my toy.
And so I wound up asking you about it. I think I saw you driving at one time too, and then I decided to ask you about it. And you were telling me about how you were telling me a little short story about how you got interested in wanting one.
Yes, I was back in 2002. My oldest son and I were up at Quality Parking Lot, and I saw this really nice silver convertible sitting there, and I was curious, and then I realized it was a Jaguar XK8, and I was more curious as to who was driving it. So we waited just to see who came out and got in. Well, this elderly man hobbled out of Quality and got in the car and drove away. He was probably from Chautauqua. And so ever since that time, I've always wanted one of those cars, and the opportunity presented itself about 6 years ago. I found one for sale down in Florida, and so I bought it. I flew down and drove it back, and it was. So now I'm the old man in the car.
Yeah. Well, like I remember telling you that they aren't they supposed to be kind of an expensive kind of car? I remember saying something to you about that's because it took all of these years to save up enough money to buy one.
Well,
aren't they hard to find parts for around here?
Not really. Now with places on the internet, such as Marketplace or eBay, you can find almost anything on there. Some things are difficult, but to buy the original parts through the dealership is astronomical.
Oh.
I have had pretty good luck finding used parts for that vehicle, and I only run it in the summer.
Was it used when you bought it, or
Yes.
it wasn't brand new
Oh
when
no,
you
it wasn't.
bought it?
No, it's a 1998, but it's in very good condition.
Yeah, it
And
looks really nice,
And I
yeah.
put it away in the summertime or in the winter.
In the winter,
And just run it
right,
in the summer.
right.
But it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it very much. It's just it was just a dream of mine, and
Oh, yeah.
fulfilled.
Well, there's one woman that I know, she said that her husband had always told her that everybody should at some point in time in their life have their dream car. And he was encouraging her, and she'd always liked the Camaros. And, well, you know where we live around here, you know. She goes, so she went shopping for a Camaro. She test drove one and everything, and was getting ready to buy it, but then she asked the dealer, well, how does it go in winter weather? And he said, like a sled. So that was the end of her wanting a Camaro.
I can appreciate that. This vehicle is totally useless in the snow.
Yeah, so you definitely cannot drive it in the snow, and it's not silver colored like the one like the one that attracted you to
it's
begin
black.
with. Yeah,
It's black. I like
yeah.
it. It's
I
jet
should have
black.
told you to bring a picture of it to show to the viewing audience.
It's in the parking lot, but anyway, a little dirty now. But yeah,
Well, I'd been wanting to get. I'd been wanting a Subaru station wagon, wishing we could have a Subaru station wagon for a long, long time. You know, the thing that impressed me was that people who already owned a Subaru station wagon, when their car wore out, that's what they always bought again, was another Subaru.
I've heard good things about
You
them
know,
as far as reliability
And then finally, eventually, we did get a Subaru station wagon, and we drove that for many years.
yes.
And we loved it so much that the last time we had to buy a car, we went from that Subaru to another Subaru. I would have been happy with just another one of the station wagons, but Carl wanted something bigger that he could pull a trailer behind when he needed to haul things like lumber for projects he wanted to work on, and so forth.
Yeah.
So
and with all-wheel drive around here, that's almost an essential.
Oh yeah. I definitely. And my son is on his second Subaru, and
Nice.
you know, the family has just fallen in love with Subarus. So now I wanted to bring up the fact that diet can have a lot to do with developing pain.
Certainly.
I mean, I've noticed, like, at times when I've maybe needed an adjustment right after Christmas, and quite often there would be a lot of other people in your waiting room if it was right after Christmas. And I got to thinking, you know, I wonder if this has something to do with all of the sugary foods and everything that people eat at Christmas, stuff they don't eat
Normally,
the rest
things
of
they don't
the-
normally eat.
Yeah.
Very rich foods, foods that are very high in certain amino acids or high in omega-6 fatty acids, gravies, rich foods with high level of purines, for instance, can cause exacerbation or flare up of gout arthritis, for instance.
What are purines?
Purines are some amino acids that are prevalent in your fatty foods, gravies, that sort of food, and they can accumulate, they break down and create a lot of uric acid in your system. So a person can develop problems with gouty arthritis, just an overload of the uric acid in the system. There again, sugars, for instance. Sugars have become a very big problem in our society. And
People eat so much of it nowadays.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Back at the turn of the century, the last century, 1900, the average American consumed 6 pounds of refined sugar
A year.
a year. That number, by the year 2000, was up to 120 pounds.
Wow.
By 2010, it was up to 160 pounds per person.
Wow.
But most of that is in the form of your high fructose corn syrup.
Oh, yeah.
Well, to compound that issue, corn, especially when you're genetically modified foods, organisms, seem to be very high in the what are called omega-6 fatty acids. And the omega-6 fatty acids create or sustain inflammation in your body. So when you get an overload of these products in your system, it can create a lot of inflammation, not only in the joints but throughout your surrounding tissues. I believe that's why we're seeing so much more fibromyalgia these days, a lot more of your autoimmune type of arthritis, rheumatoid. Trying to think what else. I think you can see a lot of other problems that you can attribute to this inflammation, even on the level of the brain. Where people have developed Parkinson's or MS or ALS, can be attributed in part to our diets.
Oh, yeah.
So,
you know, you're seeing a lot of Alzheimer's disease this
Yes.
year. And it's my understanding that there is like plaques and things building up in people's brains.
Certainly.
And that's why
Certainly.
their brains quit working properly.
Yes, and for a while there was some research that indicated that aluminum was found
Right.
in high concentrations in Alzheimer's brain tissue.
Right, right.
Cadaveric studies. That information kind of disappeared quickly, but it makes a lot of sense. That generation cooked on a lot of aluminum pans.
Yeah, you know, now that you mention it, I remember reading a book when I was still in my 20s. I think it was called Back to Eden by a man named Jethro Kloss or something
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
And he said that if you used aluminum cookware, you would poison yourself.
Oh, yes,
You would be poisoned with
It's
aluminum.
basically like
aluminum poisoning.
Yes,
yeah.
it acts like a heavy metal, just like lead or mercury.
Yeah, yeah.
Certainly.
So,
And that's definitely a problem. I try never to cook with anything aluminum. I try to stick to either cast iron, stainless steel, or glass, and that seems to be the best.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Now, what happens if you hear a lot of people that get to be very old and they say they've never been to the chiropractor. Now, what happens to people if they don't get adjustments when they need them because they don't believe in chiropractors or whatever? What kind of things can happen?
I see that a lot where people have sought other forms of therapy and never really took care of the problem. So they end up with a chronic condition which is more prone to re-exacerbation or aggravation. And unfortunately, when something doesn't heal completely or properly, it's a lot harder to fix afterwards. It's best to take care of it when it happens. It's a situation where you can pay me now or pay me later. Probably the biggest expression I hear in my office is, "Oh, I should have been in a month ago or 2 months ago, or I did this 2 years ago and it just keeps coming back." And well, if you'd taken care of it in the first place, it wouldn't be such a problem now. And quite
Yeah.
often I see a lot of people who end up going for surgery and it could have been corrected
Very easily.
very simply in the beginning
Yeah.
through chiropractic care, and then they regret it because 2 or 3 surgeries later they still have the problem, only worse.
Right, right. Yeah, I just thought I'd have you mention that. I have always heard that if you go, it turns out the results are best when you go as soon as it happens, practically.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes if a condition is too acute, I will not work on it immediately. Might advise the patient to ice it down for a day or two before we try to adjust. And if it is too difficult or painful for that patient to be put in a certain position or adjusted, I will not force it. I do not make something move until it's ready to.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, it could make them a lot worse. One of my first experiences was, probably within the first couple of months I was in practice in Mayville. I had an office uptown at 19 and a half South Erie Street for the first year.
Right.
Well, it was upstairs.
Oh,
I only
you
had one little treatment room, and I had a patient come in.
Well, that must have been before we met you. Then,
Yes.
for a year. You must have been around a bit of a while before
I
we
was
met.
here in 1986, and nobody knew I was here because I was uptown and upstairs. But it sufficed to get me through until I bought the office on 110 South Erie Street. But I had a patient come up, and I worked on him, and he had an acute low back, and he insisted that I make it move.
Oh.
So I did.
Oh, ouch.
And well, long story short, he and his father and I ended up having to carry him downstairs.
Oh. Oh.
It wasn't fun.
Oh, it was
But-
a young person then.
Yeah. He was, well, young now. I look back, and he was probably in his mid to late 30s at the time.
Oh, okay.
Maybe early 40s, which now I look back and I see someone who's in their 40s and they're young enough to be my kid. But back then he looked old. So
He was older than you.
yeah,
then.
he was older than I, but I was only 26 years old, maybe 25 at the time. And he came back a couple of days later and he said, "Next time I'll listen to you." He said, "You know, I'm not going to..."
You tried to tell him that he needed to ice it first.
Yes,
or something like that.
and
yeah.
not force it. So
Yeah.
after that, he listened to me, but it was kind of interesting, you know, as when you're first in practice, you see conditions like that, and it's kind of alarming when you see someone come in extreme pain, and it's almost kind of scary. You're
Yeah.
afraid to adjust them
Yeah.
or anything, but with years of experience, it doesn't bother me anymore. I've seen so much over the years. Nothing is ever textbook.
Yeah. Well, I remember you mentioning to me one time about a patient who'd come in that came in for an adjustment, and he said that he was feeling numb from the chest down or something like that. And you sent him to the emergency room or something instead because
Yes.
you felt it was like a ruptured disc maybe
Well,
or
it
something?
was probably beyond that. There is a condition called cauda equina syndrome, in which the spinal cord becomes completely compressed at that lower lumbar region or even the sacral region, and that can shut everything off.
Wow.
From that level down.
To where the person feels numb.
Where they feel numb, almost paralyzed, and usually that's from some type of space-occupying lesion, whether it be a protruding disc that pushes directly back into the spinal cord, or even a tumor. A lot of different conditions can happen there. And it's a very dangerous situation. It's not something to monkey with.
It's
So-
not something a chiropractor should be doing anything
No,
with.
probably not, but I like to be safe rather than sorry.
Right,
I've
right.
seen a couple cases where people came in complaining of numbness in their legs, or usually they were cold. They had impaired circulation to their legs, and they were thinking it was coming from their low back. But there may be a presentation of low back pain, but it was actually an aneurysm of the descending abdominal aorta, which we are able to palpate. So
Oh,
I try to
really?
rule
Oh,
out
my
what
gosh.
can be the most dangerous situation first.
Uh-huh.
You get so wrapped up in a routine of seeing certain conditions, but every once in a while,
You see something
something
unusual.
is different, and you have to listen to that little voice in the back of your head that says there's something more wrong here. I've referred numerous people out who were in the process of having heart attacks, gallbladder
Oh, wow.
attacks,
Wow.
appendicitis, aneurysms. You just never know. So you always have
Yeah.
to keep that option open.
Yeah.
It's better to be safe than sorry in a situation like that.
Oh, yeah. I do remember you telling me once upon a time that sometimes back pain will mean something like, if it's in the area where the kidneys are, sometimes it means there's a problem with the kidneys
Correct.
or something.
Correct.
So,
And there's this phenomenon known as referred pain. And referred pain patterns are very important to keep an eye on, because many internal problems can manifest themselves as back pain. For instance, people quite often who will have a heart attack may not necessarily have chest pain.
it'll be back pain.
It can be left shoulder pain, it can be pain in the jaw, it can be pain in the side of the neck. Not always chest pain. Same with an appendicitis. Quite often they'll feel pain in the right lower back, not necessarily
In the
the
front.
abdomen. Especially if
yeah.
it's what they call a retroperitoneal presentation, where the appendix is a little behind the peritoneum. So one of the more common ones I've seen is that of gallbladder attack, or cholestasis, where the person will have pain behind and underneath the right shoulder blade. And they won't necessarily feel anything in the area of the gallbladder or the liver. So with simple clinical tests where I have them lie on their back, bend their knees, and I'll push on that area and have them take in a deep breath, and about sends them through the ceiling if that gallbladder is inflamed or ready to burst.
Yeah.
I've sent a number of people to the hospital with those.
My sister wound up, I think it was maybe about a year and a half ago, she wound up having her gallbladder removed, but the day that she had the bad pain all of a sudden, her husband had her rushed to the emergency room because he thought she was having a heart attack, and it turned out to be that she had gallbladder stones. So
certainly
she wound up having to have surgery for that. So
yeah, it's not that uncommon. Women over 40 usually are prone to those sorts of problems, especially if they've had children.
especially if they've had children?
Yes.
I wonder why that would be.
I'm not really sure. That's interesting, though.
Would it have anything to do with the kind of foods that they crave while they're pregnant?
Could be part of it, yes.
I know you hear about the pickles and ice cream that some women crave.
Or maybe just the stress children cause them afterwards. They're a parent forever.
Okay, I remember when I first knew you, you had German Shepherds.
Yes.
Do you still adopt German Shepherds?
Oh yes,
You've
I'm on my 8th and 9th one right now.
Oh.
I've had 40, or over the last 40 years, I've had 9 German Shepherds.
9 German Shepherds.
And,
wow,
in
that's
fact,
a lot.
Yes, in fact, the 2 I have right now are father and son. And up until 2 years ago, I had their grandfather and great-grandfather.
Oh.
So at one point, I had 4 generations in my house of German Shepherds,
Wow.
which was a bed full.
You know, they get quite a lot of German Shepherds, I've noticed, at the Northern Chautauqua Canine Rescue.
Yes,
they seem to get them in there a lot.
They get them occasionally.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
They get a lot of huskies. I'll tell you what they get the most of is
Pit bulls.
not as
No?
much as chihuahuas.
Oh, chihuahuas?
Chihuahuas.
Ah,
Yeah, you would think a small dog would be easier to
Yeah.
handle. And she goes, I was asking somebody that worked there, I said, what is this with all of the chihuahuas you guys get in here all the time? And the woman said, well, they're a small package, but they're a lot. But after
Yes.
people adopt them, they
Right.
find out they're a lot of work.
and
So
they're not necessarily good with kids.
aren't they?
No.
Maybe that's part of the problem.
Yeah, that's usually
Maybe they get them for their kids.
right.
and-
That's quite
and,
often the problem.
They
is that,
tend to not like kids, or is it
well,
because kids are
kids can be a little
rough?
especially with a smaller dog, and usually smaller dogs compensate with an attitude, unlike a big dog.
They do, don't they?
Yes,
I
they do.
mean, you'll see people out walking their small variety dog, and then they'll see somebody else coming along that has a really big dog, and those little dogs will just start barking like
Oh, yeah.
crazy
Yes,
at the
they do.
big dogs, like they're trying to intimidate the big
Yeah,
dogs, you know.
they think
So-
still think they're a big dog.
They think they are.
They think they are.
Yeah, yeah. So we're down to a little over 2 minutes left. I'd like you to mention anything else you feel that my viewing audience should know about chiropractic.
Okay.
Maybe.
Well, you've asked some very excellent questions. One of the things that I do work on quite a bit are children. Children respond amazingly well
Oh,
to
I can
chiropractic
imagine
care.
because they haven't had all of those years.
That's right, of
to,
damage and,
yeah,
and re-exacerbation. And on that same line, I also work with a lot of pregnant women during their pregnancies.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay, there's chiropractic problems that are caused by being pregnant.
Oh, yes. When you're, first of all, the body during the first trimester of pregnancy secretes a hormone called relaxin, which causes the ligaments to become softer, which allows for an easier passage through the birth canal.
Oh, I
eventually.
see.
But unfortunately, it affects all your ligaments.
Oh.
So women start to experience subluxations in the spine, particularly in the pelvis. And complicate matters, you have this 20 or 30 pound pendulous mass out in front of you, so you're totally changing the biomechanics of the spine. I see a lot of problems with pelvic subluxations, mostly sacroiliac in nature. And by adjusting the woman throughout the pregnancy, she can forego problems during delivery, especially that of back labor. I've actually worked on several women while they were in labor.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Mostly Amish house calls.
oh really?
And
Wow.
to help facilitate, reduce the back spasm as well as to facilitate the delivery. It is equally important, I find, that after the delivery of the child that the woman receive chiropractic care to reduce the subluxations that have occurred during this pregnancy. You're going from having that pendulous mass out in front of you one day and all of a sudden it's not there.
All of a sudden, you're back to your regular
Well,
size.
sort of.
Sort of.
But to complicate that, women who go through C-sections
Oh,
have an additional problem in that repeated C-sections can weaken the abdominal musculature, which is very important in maintaining a healthy lumbar spine. It's the most important supportive element of the lumbar spine is to have strong core muscles. The pelvic floor muscles, the pelvic stabilizer muscles of the abdomen are very important in that. And when they get stretched out during a pregnancy and then cut during a C-section, you have a problem.
Well, I hate to say it, but we've come to the end of another episode of Fresh Perspectives, and thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. Those were excellent questions,
Oh.
and I enjoyed this thoroughly.
Oh, good,
I hope
good.
to come back sometime.
And I will see the rest of you in the viewing audience on the next episode.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.